Welcome back to Pieces of Miss Minnie. I was going to wait to talk about this topic, and for whatever reason, I woke up this morning, and today, for what had to be the day. So, it's a complicated topic. It is actually the passing away of my ex-husband. So I should say my late ex-husband, who passed away about 2.5 years ago. And there are so many topics I could actually talk about, and I will. I think I'll have to splice it out and really think about it. It's, people know what to call you if you're the widow. You are a widower. We have that in the English language. But if you are the ex-wife or husband, ex something or other, we don't have that language at use to us right now. And nor do we have the emotional, maturity is one thing, but also the nuance of it that explains the very complicated position somebody is put in when they are the ex-spouse of someone who has passed away. Not every divorce is acrimonious. Not every divorce is expensive. Not every divorce lasts a really long time. Sometimes two people just know that their time together has passed and that it's time to go their separate ways, which is what happened to us. And I got to that conclusion earlier than he did, and so it is always very complicated. The person who leaves versus the person who is left, those are very, very, very different experiences and different emotions, and I can only speak for mine. I've been divorced for quite some time, so I know it sounds like it's recent and it's raw. It's not. Actually, I got divorced in 2011 when I was married, and we got married in 2004. Actually, we eloped in Thailand days after the tsunami. And it was on New Year's Eve, and we actually had a Buddhist ceremony because he was Christian, I'm Hindu, and we kind of felt like that would meet us in the middle. I never really actually wanted to be a wife. No, let me take that back. I never wanted to be a bride. I loved being a wife. That I was actually really good at. But the whole wedding and theatrics of it all, I just didn't think was all that important. So anyway, he actually wanted a wedding. I was the one who convinced him to elope in Thailand. And I think that full circle was actually pretty interesting because after our divorce, I ended up back in Bangkok, of all cities. And it was weird. It was like I got married in Bangkok and I got divorced in Bangkok. So my karma with Bangkok will have to be explored for a later date. He passed away of unfortunate circumstances, some of which were self-inflicted and self-induced, and some of which were circumstantial and medical. And it was a surprise. He was in his mid-40s, I guess, mid to late 40s. So he was a young man, and he had such a dramatic rise. He was completely self-made, came from very, very, very humble circumstances and background. He lost his father at a very early age, and his mother worked 3 jobs at one point. He got scholarships and put himself through college and actually had a pretty steep trajectory career-wise, and actually was part of a company that sold. So that was impressive, very impressive. He was, I think, 30 or 31 at the time. And this is before like the massive, massive exits. But considering how young he was, even to this day, it would still be notable at the very least. What happened when he passed away was there were so many surprising reactions from people, non-reactions from people, empathy, lack of empathy, an enormous amount of lack of empathy, which I was not expecting, and I didn't understand. We, at that point we'd been divorced for over a decade, and I had not caused any trouble. I did not get anything out of that divorce, and I made my way in the world by myself. And yet a lot of our, say, past mutual friends, we had a group, particularly in Miami when we lived there. We were there for about 7 years. And we had a group of kind of young professional Indian friends who we had met through networking events and had sort of got pieced together. Miami was a very different city back then. This is like 2004 to 2011. It was still very transient, but we made friends here and there where we could, and we actually put together what I thought was a decent group of friends. And actually for a couple years, people ended up getting engaged, getting married, moving away, but we had about, I think, 2 odd years of like quite a bit of fun with a group of about 8 of us, 10 of us. And their reaction, their behavior, I would say, is what I think to this day I still find staggering. I am still dumbfounded. And I understand that he and I, Gary, my late ex-husband, I understand that he and I had our differences, obviously. But nobody had really been involved in our divorce, and from what I could tell, hardly any of them had even bothered staying in touch with him. I had left for Asia, so to a large extent I was off the radar, but he wasn't. And when he passed away, in those circumstances, I'll talk about some other time, they decided to put together a WhatsApp group. I know it sounds minuscule, but it wasn't when I explain it. It was a group to basically remember the good old days of Gary and, all our time together in Miami. Except the funny thing is, I basically organized a lot of those good times, and Gary paid for them. And so it was completely bizarre to me that they were remembering the good old days, but it was a group that I was explicitly excluded from. And I never, to this day, not one of them has ever called me. Not one of them has ever called to see how I was doing. Not one of them bothered. I got 2 or 3 perfunctory condolences messages, and that the word condolences, I never want to hear that fucking word again. But I was so aghast at how intentionally cruel and emotionally violent they all were, when there was no competition. I never wanted that for him. I had no hard feelings to him, and his passing away still haunts me. It is still excruciating. And I don't know why everyone thought they had to pick a side in something that absolutely did not require that kind of response. They went on it for months, and then sometime he passed away in May. It's about 2 years ago. And then out of the blue in October. So I had a rough couple months, and I, in hindsight, had the rougher months in front of me. I think the first months after he passed away, I was in such shock over his passing, over people's behavior, over the complexity and inability to explain my pain, and having to just sort through that myself and by myself. And I was living in LA at the time, which was atrocious. And it was a devastating year in my life. And so anyway, in October, for whatever reason, I had already gotten wind of this group and had actually confronted the person who had created it and called him out for being such a piece of shit. And of course, another one, the women, who was always stirring the pot, but always trying to look like the good guy, is the one who told me. They added me to this group. They had renamed it like the Miami Lunch or Dinner Club or something ridiculous. None of us ever used those words, and I don't know where that came from, but out of the blue, for no reason, they added me to this group 6 months later, expecting me to partake in whatever pantomime they had in mind, for me to pretend like we were all such good old friends, and we would just pick up where we left off. After not one person called me in all that time to even see how I was doing, but they had been running their mouths about the good old days and pretending, they were pretending they had more affection from Gary than they did, because if they had, they would have been there for him throughout all those years, and he wouldn't have gotten as sick as he did without anybody's help or consideration. And the fact that I had basically been the connective tissue that had brought that group together and had done, back then, because he had sold a company, we had more money than everybody else. And so we had a really, really, really gorgeous condo on Miami Beach. And I like hosting. So I would, go all out. And I had, at our expense, I had hosted engagement parties for them, moving parties, birthday parties, with catering, with staff. Like, I had spent a lot of money on these people, and the cruelty that they showed me years later for no reason. They took a bad situation and they made it so much worse for me. And I don't know, still to this day, I don't know what they got out of it. It's 2.5 years later, and I'm still dumbfounded. Obviously, I don't speak to any of them, and nor will I ever again. And I want to talk more about that in-between place that some of us find us in. A lot of us are divorced. A lot of us, we'll lose our parents, we'll lose our siblings, and we will lose spouses and ex-spouses. And that is a very complicated place to find yourself in. And I think people's behavior, their empathy for what little there is sometimes, that I for those of you out there who find yourself in this position, or you might find yourself in this position sometime, when you are neither on the inside nor exactly on the outside. We don't have the language yet, and we certainly don't have the emotional maturity and nuance, as I said about earlier. But I do want to say that I understand you, and I see you, and you are not alone. I understand what a labyrinth it is, what a dark labyrinth it is to navigate, and you will do a lot of that by yourself, and I'm so sorry. But someday you will, with the right amount of time, you will find your way out of it. And I hope it makes your heart larger and stronger, and I hope it makes you also realize how strong you are. And I don't know, for the other people who behave badly, I don't really have many words for them. I don't understand that kind of behavior, and I hope I never become that kind of person. But for those of you who find yourself in the position that I found myself in, that I still navigate 2.5 years later, and I probably will to a certain extent for the rest of my life, you're not alone. And there's a way out. It takes some time, but there's a way out. So, anyway,